As in response, Peg sends now... This is my life. This is the life that I live, folks. These are the things that happen to me. Tug, you're going to have to hold it a bit. I'm the Orange Ranger, and welcome to another Power Rangers Hyperforce session review. Shine up your badges and get your judgment scanners ready. The Hyperforce Rangers have set course for Newtech City in the year 2025, home of Space Patrol Delta. Let's take a look at the 14th session of Hyperforce, Newtech's Mutant Menace. The Rangers launched their timeship into the hyperstream headed for the year 2025. The turbulence from this wakes up Vesper, who was napping in the medical bay for some reason. I'm going to go ahead and get this out of the way. This session does not address what happened to her last week, why she was inactive, why Alpha was so evasive about it, etc. But knowing Malika, I'm sure we'll come back to it another time. Jack wants to figure out how to take down the Alliance, but Eddie points out that right now their mission and their priority is finding Joe. Marv speculates that they can use whatever it is that connects them in order to find Joe. At first, he did actually call it the morphing grid, but then he remembered that he's not supposed to know what that is. This session had a couple things happen that make me think that the players and the people running the game like to take the opportunities when fans point out things that didn't seem quite right or weren't quite correct to correct those things in later sessions. For example, here, Eddie points out that he listened to the message from Jen once more, and he realized that Jen never actually said she was sending anyone to help them, which is something that I pointed out in a previous review, but that in fact just that she was sending out a distress call to all of their agents in the field to try to help them. Joe came to help the Rangers all on his own, and Jen legitimately didn't know anything about him. They consider using their morphers to track Joe's, but Marv quickly shoots that idea down. Their morphers are connected to each other and can track each other, but Joe has an entirely different kind of morpher and it's not connected to theirs. Vesper, who is suddenly wearing glasses after her nap led to some kind of fashion epiphany, and I'm not actually referring to the fact that Christina was wearing glasses at the session. Chloe actually mentions this in story and kind of actually makes it canon. Anyway, Vesper has her own idea, praying to find Joe like they did with Marv before. Even Jack gets on board with this, actually putting on glasses himself, giving the entire team a bespectacled look. But they only try this for a second or two before they realize it's kind of ridiculous. Even Alpha asks them what they're doing, and they in turn ask Alpha if there's anything about the Hyperforce morphers that is uniquely registered to them that might help. Alpha points out that just like the Timeforce morphers, the Hyperforce morphers are encoded directly to the Ranger's DNA. Chloe asks if they happen to have any records of when Joe visited the ship, such as a DNA scan. However, all they have is Alpha's visual record of the event, and rewatching that doesn't yield any real results. Marv says, hey, we do have my DNA. Would we be able to do a scan using that? Alpha says this is a possibility. They're not identical twins, so it's only going to be scanning for similar DNA. There could be some discrepancies. Scanning for DNA actually gives Eddie a different idea. They can search the ship and see if they have any of the DNA from Primator, and if they'd be able to force that DNA to change into Joe's DNA since he changed into him before. I'm going to go ahead and fast forward on that particular thread and tell you that they don't find anything from Primator, so that doesn't go anywhere. Vesper has another idea with a slightly better chance of success than the first one. Why don't they just call him? However, I will also tell you that that one doesn't go anywhere either. As a matter of fact, they never even attempted it. But then Vesper points out something that shows just what a good role player Christina is. Vesper's been asleep for over a day and has absolutely no idea what's going on. The Rangers quickly get her up to speed on the message from Abigail, the mission they've received from Jen, etc. They're about to explain to her about the Mystic Mother thing when they're interrupted by Alpha. Scanning for similar DNA to Marv's has yielded Joe's location. He's located on the top floor of a building in Newtech City's very posh, rich people district, the Miracle Mile. However, Alpha tells the Rangers that since the DNA scan was not for an exact match, this information is going to have a 30-minute delay on it. I suppose we're just going to have to pretend that that makes some kind of scientific sense and just roll with it, huh? The Rangers show some real experience here, how they've grown as a team, and decide to go over their intel on 2025 in Newtech City and SPD, and go in with a cover story already prepared instead of just winging it. Jack says that he knows a great way that they could get into any place that they needed to go. Building inspectors. However, Marv has a different idea. He points out that there is actually a branch of SPD on Cayenne. And this could actually mean one of two different things. It either means that SPD did continue to exist alongside Timeforce, kind of like the police and the military, straight through to 3016, or like that one suit in SPD suggested, SPD did become Timeforce, and there's a branch of Timeforce on Cayenne, and Marv just knows his history well enough to know that that branch on Cayenne of Timeforce used to be SPD. Anyway, since there's a branch of something on Cayenne, Marv says that they can claim to be SPD officers from the planet Cayenne. Jack points out that they don't know how to look like SPD officers, so Marv asks Alpha to scan SPD and find out about their look so they can replicate uniforms. Alpha says that he can't do that for some reason that is never actually explained. As a matter of fact, I would think that that information would already be in their historical database, but okay. But Marv says that's actually fine. They can just patch together some kind of uniforms and say those are just Cayenne SPD uniforms. As a matter of fact, they could even morph and just say that they're SPD Rangers from the planet Cayenne. Vesper says they could just show up morphed already and just claim to be cosplayers. Jack nixes this idea, though, saying that by 2025, cosplay was deemed to be racially insensitive appropriation. But Chloe protests this, saying that is not true, which makes sense when you consider that Megan is herself an avid cosplayer. The whole SPD thing is starting to seem like a really complicated idea, so they start going back and forth between that and the building inspector idea. Marv once again points out that if they claim to be SPD officers, they'll be able to morph out in the open. However, Alpha points out that if they are going to claim to be SPD officers, they have to be very careful about their terminology. A little bit earlier, they had said if they had to morph, they would claim to be the A Squad. However, Earth already has an A Squad, and a B Squad, and a D Squad. Presumably a C Squad as well, but I don't think we ever saw C Squad on screen represented anywhere. Anyway, the Rangers decide that they will be H Squad. H for Hyperforce. Eddie's not entirely convinced, feeling like they shouldn't draw so much attention to themselves, so maybe the building inspector idea is better. But Marv points out that if SPD Rangers were to show up on Earth unexpectedly, they would likely be taken to the head of Earth's SPD branch, and for all they know, that's where Joe is headed. Jack says that he feels like Marv is right, and more to the point, Marv is their leader. Chloe asks what they're actually going to do, and all eyes turn to Marv. He steps forward as their leader and declares their plan. SPD H Squad it is. They ask Alpha for appropriate uniforms, but Alpha points out something kind of interesting. They don't really need disguises this time around. The 5 of them are wearing Timeforce uniforms, and since they're claiming to be a police force from another planet, there you go. Vesper licks Alpha's hand, saying this is a DNA sample, and if anything happens to her on this mission, he can clone her. Chloe thinks this is a fantastic idea, so she licks the wall and says her sample is over here. The girls on this team. Alpha just says that he'll do full DNA profiles of each of the Rangers when they return. The Rangers teleport down to where Joe's signal most recently was. They play it totally legit, walking in the front door like they own the place and getting in the elevator. However, when the doors close, an alarm starts going off and Joe's signal disappears from their morphers. When they reach the top floor, they find a penthouse full of antiquities and rich, valuable-looking things. As a matter of fact, it looks a little too rich for its own good, like maybe this place isn't entirely on the up and up. But they also notice that the place has been ransacked and there's a man hanging from the balcony outside. Marv rescues him, and this rich, confident man says his name is Adonis Washington and says that his most valuable possession has been stolen. So how was it stolen? Some kind of invisible force busted in, broke open the case and took the item and then took off without ever being seen. Invisible, you say? Do we happen to know anybody who has invisibility powers? Marv asks why the item might have been stolen, but all Adonis will say is that it's really, really valuable. The Rangers start running crime scene evidence gathering, and Adonis realizes that they might just be cops. When he asks who they are, and they say Space Patrol Delta, he very suddenly changes his tune. All of a sudden, everything's fine. He can just replace the item. He's a very rich, important man. As a matter of fact, he's engaged to one of the most wealthy women in town. He's rich and, valuable, and he can just replace the item. Everything's going to be fine. You officers can go. Don't worry your little heads about it. I'm going to replace that item. I'm not going to press charges or anything. It's fine. Just don't let me waste any more of your time. Jack, of course, decides to continue investigating, and Marv and Eddie discuss how Adonis is acting kinda weird, when suddenly the doors burst open again, and a trench coat wearing woman leads 3 SPD officers inside. She calls out, "Hands up, on the floor, everybody down, etc., etc." Adonis complies right away, almost like he's used to this happening before, but the Rangers say, "We're on the same team, SPD officers, everything's fine here." She really focuses her attention on Adonis at first, asking him what happened here, and saying that he is suspected of owning a proton accelerator, and a scan of the room shows that it has been in that room very recently. Adonis is taken into custody, and then the Rangers start talking with this detective, a Lena Song from SPD D-Squad. Lena buys their story for the moment and explains that Newtech City has been facing a new problem as of late. Mutants. Mutant attacks have been on the rise lately, and she fears it has something to do with the very dangerous proton accelerator that she was looking for in this penthouse. Joe's location is updated on the Rangers' morphers, and they go to leave, but she stops them, asking them where they think they're going. They tell her it's classified. They kind of play themselves up throughout this as kind of a deep undercover squad, so a lot of stuff is classified. But she says that she does want to help them and even offers the use of her car. Eddie asks Lena more about the mutants, and she says that they just showed up all of a sudden a short while ago and then began causing trouble. Troublingly, they seem to have human sympathizers, as humans have been seen intermingling with them and helping them, and bits of technology have been disappearing all across town, just like the proton accelerator. They pile into her SUV and mash up the technology of their morphers and her GPS, and figure out the signal is coming from the defunct Oaks Home Furnishings. As they roll up to this defunct warehouse, Eddie, Jack, and Vesper notice a person high up in the windows with binoculars. They have been spotted. They plan to enter in a strategic formation when suddenly there's a giant explosion. Those tend to mess up strategic formations. They all pull weapons and start running towards the warehouse, and the Rangers realize that Joe's signal has vanished from their morphers once again. The doors to the factory blast open, and out walks... well... it's a pirate made of furniture. I mean... It's a pirate made of furniture. What more can really be said about that? His name is Captain Pegs, and he even has a little wooden macaw that he calls Birdie. Because, of course he does. Lena says that this is one of the mutants that's been causing trouble in the city. A mutant made of wood. Alrighty, we've seen stranger things, I suppose. Birdie dives at Vesper, picks her up by the hair, and then drops her. As Chloe and Marv debate whether or not they can morph, Vesper pulls her blade and jumps wildly at the bird, but can't get quite high enough. Marv points out something that I thought would have been really cool and very nice attention to detail. They're absolutely able to morph in front of Lena, they just have to say SPD emergency instead of it's morphin' time. However, Andre decides to play it safe and take a little time out to ask Malika if that's something that would actually fly. And Malika indicates that they would have to roll to see if Lena would be convinced that that was in fact SPD technology. So Marv decides also to play the safe and has Lena check around the back of the building for civilians, and then they suit up.
Right. Hyperforce! Blue! Ready! Power up!
Hyperforce! Pink! Ready! Power up! Hyperforce! Black! Ready! Power up!
Hyperforce! Yellow! Ready! Power up!
Minor little note on the morphing sequence I wanted to throw in here. Just like I did just now, they used the full 5 Ranger morphing sequence, and it included the music, whereas they haven't had music before. I think the difference is that the 5 Ranger sequence does have music on it, whereas when they use individual clips and there are less than 5 Rangers morphing, it doesn't have the music. We've just happened to have people out for one time and another, meaning they had to piece those clips together, hence not having the music on them. Anyway, Peg says that he is not afraid of Power Rangers, indicating that he's possibly had a run-in with the B Squad before, and we're going to address where B Squad is in just a little bit here. Peg slashes Marv for some damage, then Jack attacks Pegs, but Pegs is able to block it. Chloe decides to start this battle at 11 and activates her pink Battle Warrior armor. And by the way, this has never actually been stated out loud until this point, but Chloe's Battleizer gives her +4 to attack and +6 to damage. Dang, girl, dang. She blows through her entire pirate vocabulary at once, perhaps inspired by another pirate in pink, and then fires 3 arrows at Pegs, which drives him back. Eddie decides to play a little baseball, and guess what? Birdie's the ball. He jumps up with his trident and swinging a drives Birdie right back into Pegs. Pegs is none too happy about this, but Eddie takes a second to return a chunk of hair that the bird ripped out of Vesper's head back to her. However, she hands it right back to him. He can use this to clone her if he wants. This is the second time that Vesper has mentioned cloning herself, which I feel makes it necessary to point out that Vesper is an android, and thus does not actually have DNA. Marv and Chloe try a teamwork attack, and Malika takes this second to announce the teamwork attacks have once again been made easier. However, this doesn't mean that role-playing in general is always easy, as this gets a little bit complicated. Marv has the idea of having Chloe fire a whirlwind attack at Pegs just for the purposes of distracting him, so Marv can sneak around from behind and get a surprise attack bonus. However, Malika does not allow this. You see, a surprise attack means the enemy doesn't even know that you are there. Pegs knows that Marv is there, so this would not technically be a surprise attack. So Marv says, okay, never mind, Chloe, I'll just attack the monster on my own. Nay, speaketh the Game Master. I believe that she had already set a team difficulty for their attack, and once it was spoken into being, never shall it be undone. And you want to know the best part? The attack missed anyway, and Pegs hit Marv back on the counter. Pegs then walks over to a pile of furniture, throws a grenade into it, and dives for cover. The Rangers also dive for cover, though Marv is the only one that successfully does so, the rest of them taking damage. Pegs scratches at this purple and black patch that he has on his shoulder, and he's actually been kind of poking at it throughout the battle. Chloe wonders if that's a weak point that they should maybe attack for massive damage, though Jack worries about making their problem even bigger, hint, hint. However, they don't have any better ideas, so Chloe aims an arrow at it and fires, striking true. And this gives us confirmation of something we basically were suspecting since we heard mutants to begin with, as knocking off the patch exposes Peg's mutant DNA, and he grows. Pegs is not just any mutant. He's a mutant from the year 3000, the type that Timeforce fought. Now, you might notice that when there are either important plot points that aren't fully resolved by the end of a session, or kind of the opposite of that, something that sounds like an important plot point that doesn't actually go anywhere, I like to try to let you folks know about that so you're not waiting for it by the end of this video. So I will also tell you in this case that the reason that mutants from either 975 years in the future or 24 years in the past are in 2025 is not explained by the end of the session. However, Pegs is none too pleased to have grown and seems to be very carefully trying to avoid damaging furniture around him. Picking up on this, Vesper promptly smashes a chair. In reply, Pegs sends a now giant birdie, so they share the same DNA, I guess? They're part of the same body? I don't know. After Vesper, and Marv says that this would probably be a really good time for them to call the Hyperzords. Problem is that they can't do that, at least not all of them. Chloe is way short at 2 energy after activating her Battleizer, and even Marv's a little bit short at 4 energy. Birdie smacks into Vesper like a passenger jet. Marv calls up to Pegs and says if you didn't want to grow, then just shrink back down and we'll finish this here. However, Marv, that is not actually how it works in Timeforce. What is done cannot be undone. So the Rangers form their Hyper Vortex Blaster, with Marv quickly taking a second to show Vesper where her disc goes in the formation. They then shoot the bird, and it explodes. They have to dive for cover to avoid the splinters, but once again, Marv is the only one to successfully do so. I mean, really, this was determined by the rolls of the dice, but hey, Marv is simply trying to demonstrate to his team the proper way to take cover. And I mean, besides, he can't lead them if he's dead, right? Peg swats at the team with his giant sword and hits them for more damage. Marv's now just a bit fed up and realizes that he now does have the energy to summon his Zord. So he summons down the Lion Hyperzord and uses a Super Clawed Pounce to hit Pegs for some damage. Vesper then calls down her Cerberus Hyperzord and does a Super 3-headed Shred right at the exposed DNA spot. And by the way, you might notice a lot of supers in this session. I'm not really sure what happened. There was no charity effort. There was no special guest to entice this. But at one point, they had as many as 15 supers. Chloe still doesn't have the energy necessary to activate her Phoenix Sword. Just to point this out, by the way, the Rangers get 1 point of energy for each successful attack, so there is a system in place where they can morph using energy and then earn that energy back to be able to summon their Zords. She just hadn't earned enough energy back yet. So in this case, she doesn't really know what she should do. The other Rangers suggest maybe shooting at that DNA spot again. She fires some more arrows at it and actually, with a double super, hits for more damage than the Zords were doing. Chloe, OP. But again, please do not nerf, K thanks. Jack and Eddie, who are also unable to summon their Zords, decide to team up. Jack launches Eddie up using his Creus hammer, and then Eddie sprays the monster's face down with water. Because what does a pirate fear more than drowning? Eddie lands on Peg's shoulder, right above the exposed DNA spot. Opportunity! He stabs down with his trident into the DNA and then sprays more water. What happens to wood when it gets wet? It swells. Pegs grows big and round and then explodes. Lena returns and says she can't believe that SPD on Cayenne has the Ranger program. I know, right? That's crazy. She says that now she's convinced she has to take them to a higher authority. They actually contemplate running away, since this could expose their cover story, but they end up deciding that running away would actually do more damage to their cover story. So they pile back into her SUV, and she says it'll be about a 5-minute drive to headquarters, if you follow me. Lena leads the Rangers inside and into a quiet office, and seated inside that office is one Commander Anubis Doggy Kruger. In a very nice touch, I think, Kruger was actually portrayed by Zach, who was just standing beside Malika in what was essentially a cameo. It's not that Malika can't portray male characters or tough characters, she has done that in the past. It's just that Kruger has this kind of gruff personality that suited Zach very well. Kruger asks Lena for a situation debriefing and she explains everything that's happened. By the by, she says that these Rangers claim to be from the Lion Galaxy, and that gives me the opportunity to explain something that I picked up on recently in terms of when this session actually aired, not necessarily when this video was posted, but I haven't had an opportunity to explain until now. It turns out that Peter didn't just come up with Planet Cayenne all on his own because he likes peppers or something. To avoid any sort of spoilers, I will simply say that Planet Cayenne is a world in Uchu Sentai Q Ranger in the Lion Galaxy. I hadn't picked up on this because I am ridiculously stupid behind on Q Ranger. Though funny enough, it also just so happens that Mick from Ninja Steel and Super Ninja Steel is also said to be from the Lion Galaxy. So now we have the possibility, however remote, that Hyperforce, Ninja Steel, and Q Ranger all take place in the same universe? Excuse me for a moment while my brain melts. Brain reconstituted, let's move on, shall we? Kruger wonders why the Cayennian embassy wouldn't see fit to inform him that they were sending Rangers to Earth, but they say, red tape, lost in the mail, missed phone call, etc., etc., etc. They then work their actual mission into their cover story. One of their officers, SPD officers, was sent ahead of them on a covert mission, but now it's very important that they find him and reconnect with him. Lena points out that these Rangers did help them by taking out Captain Pegs, but Kruger is still very suspicious. These Rangers have turned up at not one, but 2 crime scenes. Lena agrees that there may be some kind of link between these Rangers and the increased mutant violence. So Kruger wants to arrest them, but Lena clarifies. Whatever they're tracking seems to be involved with the mutant violence. Marv says that if they find their man and they do find out that he's involved in some bad business, they'll let the law run its course. Things start to get a little diplomatically sticky here. Kruger suggests that he could take their trackers, not being aware that they are actually their morphers, and use those to track down this mysterious person. Marv says, you could do that if you felt like starting a diplomatic incident with Cayenne. Lena tries to calm things down and tells Kruger that if he is still doubting the Ranger's sincerity, he does have a tool that he can use to get more information and find out for sure. His judgment scanner, which for those of you who aren't familiar with SPD, is a function of the SPD morpher. Kruger scans Marv and asks if he really is from the planet Cayenne. That much, of course, is actually true, and Marv really wisely jumps on this opportunity. Look, that was true. We're telling the truth. We don't have a lot of time here. We need to get going. Kruger says that they have already been tracking the mutants, as well as whatever this secret thing is that seems to be following along with them. They believe that this secret thief might be somebody in league with a mutant named Napoleon Wretch. The Rangers get a signal on their morphers that updates them on Joe's location. Kruger catches this, and unable to really hide it, the two of them decide to compare notes. Their information matches up, which means that Joe is with these mutants headed by Napoleon Wretch. Kruger decides to help them for the moment, but says first they need to watch the surveillance video that was taken from the penthouse of... What was that idiot's name? Which idiot? Lena asks. The rich asshole. Commander Kruger, such language. In the words of Eddie, bad dog. To their credit, they did get on social media after the session and try to claim that Commander Kruger was referring to an Ashul, a vile, slimy swamp creature that lives on planet Sirius. Whatever terminology you use, it was Adonis Washington that they were referring to. And by the way, Lena points out that the rich, beautiful woman that Adonis mentioned being engaged to is Rita Banks. And Kruger says he doesn't want to get involved in a run-in with the ultra-rich, ultra-powerful Banks family. Eddie's ears perk up, of course, but Lena says it's classified information and they're not going to talk about it anymore. Doggy shows them surveillance footage of the penthouse from just before they arrived. An invisible force busts in, opening the doors, steals the proton accelerator, and leaves via the balcony. So, Kruger says, this man you're looking for. Does he happen to be telekinetic or have powers related to invisibility? The Rangers play dumb at first, saying, their tech is SPD tech. SPD tech doesn't let you turn invisible. That's ridiculous. So Kruger uses the judgment scanner on Marv once again. Is the person you're looking for capable of turning invisible? Marv responds that he is not entirely familiar with this person's technology. The judgment scanner at first reads that as a lie, but when Marv points out that he means that statement absolutely literally, he is not entirely familiar with this person's technology, it changes to flipping back and forth again, meaning the statement is ambiguous and partially true. Kruger agrees to help them out, but says that A Squad is off-world and B Squad is training. This would presumably place this episode during the SPD episode SWAT, although if that's the case, that means that both Doggy and Sam are Rangers that could help out with this situation, so who knows for sure. All Doggy can spare to them is Lena, and since he doesn't want to see Earth SPD cries to Cayenne for Ranger help with mutant outbreak on every newspaper in the city, he places them directly under Lena's supervision and tells them to stay low. They're going to be doing this undercover. They're going to infiltrate the warehouse where the mutants and their human sympathizers have been hiding out. Lena gives Eddie a visual tracker contact lens and takes one for herself. This means that when they close one eye, they can see the viewpoint of the other through their other eye, which is something that's pretty neat. She hands out disguises to everyone and they all choose to demorph. Everyone, that is, except for Chloe, who thinks that she would like to stay in her battle warrior form, just in case they need a lot of power really quickly. She is going to need something to cover that suit up, however, so Lena lets her borrow her trench coat. The Rangers get another update on their morphers of Joe's location, but it hasn't changed. Lena tries to learn more about this person that the Rangers are looking for, but besides describing him physically, they say that they are telling the absolute truth, and they are actually, when they say that he has been acting deep undercover and they don't know much about his mission. They arrive near the warehouse and Lena says she's going to have to sit this one out on the sidelines. These mutants have already seen her acting as an SPD officer, so she would not blend in. She gives them ear communicators to talk to her and leaves. A little bit earlier, Lena had pointed out that the humans that were sympathizing with these mutants seemed to be the down and out, the downtrodden, the homeless, the jobless, etc., etc. So Eddie points out that they should be a little bit careful here. Most of the people involved are probably not evil, they're just desperate. They approach the warehouse and see three young men playing jacks and guarding a door. Jack bellies up to him and says he's looking for some gambling, he needs to make some money. And his intimidation leads them to open the door. Inside, they see a scene straight out of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2. A rockin' teenage party with an arcade, a half-pipe, basketball, and some gambling games. What they don't see, however, is Joe. They decide to split up so they don't look so conspicuous walking as a unit. Eddie and Vesper heading off one direction, Marv and Chloe heading off the other direction, and Jack muscling his way into a line for basketball, breaking the hoop with a dunk, and then trying to put it back up, but it's like dangling. Eddie and Vesper spot a ramp near the arcade that goes down, so they start investigating it. And Vesper starts asking Eddie about his family, the Banks. Eddie admits that his family is rich, but says it's something that he doesn't really enjoy talking about. Vesper says it's not what he's thinking, she's kind of played up the into riches and jewels thing before, but more that in her life experiences she's seen that a person being brought up rich kind of has an impact on their point of view. Eddie says that's actually his point exactly. People hear his last name and make all sorts of assumptions about him. Vesper apologizes, saying that's not what she intended, and it's really just that they haven't had an opportunity to talk about things like this recently. Now listen, all this relationship building, it's real nice, but we've got a plot to get back to. Especially, as I kind of hinted before about picking up on people's suggestions, after 13 was a little bit dry, I kind of sensed wanting to stick more to the main plot and not branch off in so many different directions, so that may have been an adjustment they made. So, all of a sudden, a guy interrupts this conversation, calling down to them, mistaking Eddie for a man named Johnny, who in fact may have been another one of Eddie's ancestors. He decides the best thing to do is play along with this and introduces Vesper as his new squeeze box, V-Dog. The guy makes fun of his hair, saying his mom must have cut it. He wants to spar with Johnny and makes him a bet based on the haircut. If Johnny wins, the guy will get the same haircut. If the guy wins, he won't fix Johnny's hair. So either way, it doesn't sound like Johnny's hair is getting fixed, but alrighty then. Johnny accepts, and the guy leads them through a door in the back into a training area with a boxing ring. This guy's feeling a little bit chatty, so he says he's just really excited to hear that the absorption is finally happening. What the what now? Eddie says that, he's been all into V-Dog, been focusing all his attention on her. He's gotten a little bit fuzzy. Remind me about what the absorption is again? Vesper, for her part, says V-Dog is from out of town, so she doesn't know anything about this. Hit me with them deeds. The guy says that he heard that they've got the final piece that they need to make the bacon. The beacon. Eddie says, tell V-Dog about what the beacon is. He seems a little bit suspicious, so Vesper says, you can just show it to me. I'm really good with technology. I pick up on it from that. The guy says, man, technology's not my thing. That's Napoleon's deal. As if on cue, a loud gong goes off, and all the teenagers start filing through the training area and into a large concrete 3-level room nearby it. The Rangers fall into line and start activating their surveillance equipment, making sure they get all the information that they can. A tiny little man with purplish skin and yellowish hair, wearing robes and a cape, and carrying 2 glowing orbs, walks out. And this indeed is Napoleon Wretch. He tells these people that he calls his family that the time of the great reclaiming is at hand, that will return them to their proper place. However, the reason that Napoleon has deigned to show his face here is that one among them has proven their worth and is being promoted to his personal bodyguard. He calls Maxwell out of the crowd, and as you're probably expecting, Joe walks out and kneels before Napoleon. The Rangers are momentarily shocked, but quickly get their bearings. Joe is on an undercover mission. This is probably part of all that. Lena, through Eddie's visual transceiver, spots the proton accelerator and says they need to get a hold of that thing right now. The Rangers say they can't take any action with so many civilians around, so she says at the very least, follow it, keep your eyes on it, don't let it out of your sight. They agree to do so as the session ends. This was an interesting session to be sure, very steeped in the world of SPD, the settings, the characters, the style of the storytelling, all of that. It didn't really feature a lot of what I'd call character growth besides that conversation between Eddie and Vesper, but all in all, this session really felt like a setup session. We're clearly getting part 2 of this story next week, and that is where I'm expecting the payoff. A very subtle thing that I still picked up on, at least I think that this was intentional and noticed and I actually really enjoyed, was the idea of this being the start of the new normal. Each of the Rangers, besides Vesper technically, though I feel like this still applies to her as well, acted with the new level of determination that they received after meeting the Mystic Mother. Marv was much more assertive and acted much more as a leader. Chloe made very determined choices and stood by them even when they seemed incredibly unusual. Eddie acted with a lot more bravery, and Jack was bolder and far more intimidating. Even Vesper actually seemed more energetic and a lot more Vesperish. Not the perfect session, not the most exciting we've had, but still good action, good plot development. It was good. Newtech's Mutant Menace gets a 4 out of 5. That's going to do it for another Power Rangers Hyperforce session review. Thank you, heroes, so much, as always, for watching. Make sure to like the video by clicking that thumbs up button right down below. In the comments, let me know what you thought about this session. Did you like it better than I did, or maybe not even as much? Have a discussion down in the comments. And Thumpers, as always, make sure to check in. I love hearing from you folks. Make sure to subscribe to the channel to see all of my videos, and make sure you ring that bell so you get notified of whenever I post new ones, just like this Power Rangers Hyperforce session review. And if you should happen to be inspired by the quality of my work to toss a little money into my tip jar, you can head to digitaltipjar.com/orangerangervid. Anything that lands in that jar is something that I appreciate. Until next time, heroes, may the power protect you, and go Hyperforce. Hello there, heroes. I'm the Orange Ranger, and welcome. Shine up your badges, get your judgment scanners ready. I like how two things happened at once there. Shine up your badges and get your judgment scanners ready. The Hyperforce Rangers have blasted off for... The Hyperforce Rangers have set course for Newtech City in the year 2025. Squealer! Hello there, heroes. I'm the Orange Ranger, and welcome to... That's actually something I know they're doing. There was just signs of it here. I do know, by the way, that they are reading the fan feedback and responding to it. Just, I'm talking about the action. I'm just... For example, in this session, Damn it. Vesper, who is suddenly wearing glasses after her nap led to some kind of fashion fart. Marv says that they can just claim to be SPD and that's just the look that they're using on the planet Cayenne right now. And that's just the look that they're using on the planet Cayenne right now. Presumably a C Squad as well, but I don't think we ever saw them represented on screen. The whole SPD idea is starting to seem really complicated, so they start going kind of back and forth between... Excuse me. Maybe the building inspector idea would be better. However, Marv points out that the screen is over there. And for all they know, that's probably where Joe is going. Gosh. However, when the doors close, an alarm starts going off, and yep. Do we know anybody recently who has invisibility I'm doing that again. She calls out, hands up on the floor, you know, etc., etc., etc. But the Rangers say, hey, we're SPD. Gosh, darn it, SPD. Lena, I hadn't said her name. Asking him what happened and saying that he's suspected of having owned But the Rangers say, hey, we're on your side. SPD officers, no problems here, no problems, it's fine. And now my own body's fighting me, so that's good. Almost like this is something he's used to having had happen. What are you doing? They do tell her it's classified. Birdie... Lena says that this is one of the mutants that's been causing trouble in the city, which could indicate that he's had a run with the B Squad. He's had a run. Minor little oh god. He then returns a little bit of, yeah. Peg's and this gives us confirmation of something that we probably have been, Funny thing is, Pegs doesn't seem happy to have after Vesper. And Marv says that they should, yeah. However, Pegs doesn't seem happy that he's actually grown. As, God. He summons his Lion Hyperzord and does a Super Clawed Shred. Super Clawed Pounces. Chloe does not and seated in the office is one Commander Anubis Doggy Kruger. Sure is. And it's not that I don't think one of their officers was sent ahead of them covertly, but now it's very important that they find him and reconnect with him. And I don't know the rest of the take. So, what? Kruger wonders why the Cayennian embassy wouldn't see fit to inform him that they're sending... Things start to get a little bit diplomatically sticky here. Kruger suggests that he could just confiscate their, farts. Can't call them morphers. I said trackers, but... Which means Joe is in fact with these mutants that are headed by... A little earlier, a rockin' teenage party with an arcade and a half pipe and some basketball and some gambling games and some just other fun stuff that make me do the take again. Arcade machines, a half-pipe, basketball, gambling.